Hello friends, good morning. Welcome to MLDS. So myself Manan Bhatt, I am working as a founding engineer, and this is a joint session between Orkes and one of our esteemed customer, StoneX. So yeah, we are hearing a lot about AI experimentation, right? So we see that some of the models are being, new models are coming every day. We try out few things for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but most of those things doesn't land up in the production system, right? Because enterprise doesn't work this way. Enterprise has their own system, their own guardrails. Anything which is impacting revenue doesn't land up in the uh, production system, right? Okay, so this is the reality, right? So we have chatbots, co-pilots, we have Olama, where we can run any foundational model locally, right? People are spending heavily on compute rather than before. But enterprise has a different layer. Enterprise has legacy applications, database, compliance, reviews, on-prem systems, right? Their own set of microservices. So MIT actually published a report last year, July 2025, where uh, what they did, they just analyzed that of all those experiments, how many experiments are actually reaching to the production system. So what they find out that 95% of those small experiments doesn't land up in the production system, right? So why it is like that? Why it is like everyone is trying different things to come up different things, but when it is about a production system, then it's not being hit as what we thought. So there is an integration trap, right? So we know how to run models locally, we know how to do things locally, but it is just 1% of the overall story, right? What enterprise has 99% of a different system where we don't have a system where it can act as an integrator between the compute or the running models and the existing applications, right? So primarily what happens, like enterprise has huge API surfaces, right? Like there are hundreds of microservices, each have their own contract, each have their own authentication, right? If at today we want to make each microservices agentic compatible, right, then it's basically an overhead on our system. Now another problem with this approach is not all microservices needs to be agent compatible, right? Like some of the services talk directly to our on-prem layer, right? Those services we don't need to refactor at all because MCP tools doesn't need to know complete internals of our system, right? So now we have microservice, now we are refactoring. So in this process, we create actually duplication, right? So this is basically a back and forth sprawl we are creating, correct? So now basically what happens? So let's say we want to adopt this new technology, but there is still a gap. So what systems, any uh, production system should suffice or what integrator should provide? These are the four major basic points which will help us to adopt this agentic world into our enterprise ecosystem, correct? So as I mentioned earlier, right? So enterprise will have APIs, hundreds of APIs. But what we want a way to connect those API faster. So we need a MCP tool where we can connect those services really fast. We can run those experiments very quickly, and then we can actually reduce the number of iterations it take to land it up in the production system. Another thing is we have to build the agentic layer, right? Because ultimately running, as I mentioned earlier, right, like running a model with some trained data is very small part of the story, but the overall business logic that can sits outside, right? So those logic, if we have a platform where we can write those logic also, then it's an added advantage. Since it's a production based system, it has to be provided durable executions for our production workloads, right? The execution has to be durable because it's a production system, so it is directly impacting the incoming revenues, correct? Now since it's a new platform, correct, so it has to provide certain guarantees, right? Like debugging, observability, compliance, guardrails, right? So we have come up with a platform which we called it as a Orkes Conductor, right? The first point we discussed was we need a tool where we can connect our existing services faster. So we have come up with a platform called Orkes MCP Gateway. What it does, we have to write our service description in MCP Gateway, and what Conductor will do, Conductor will create a workflow which can be used by any Agentic SDK, right? So that way our everything related to MCP and the tooling will stay with Conductor and the existing infrastructure. So Conductor can act as an integrator between those two different systems. So here we can see that, so we have synchronous workflow execution and asynchronous workflow execution can be there, right? So here we can see that Orkes sits in between our external facing system and the internal production system. Right. So now on point 2. So now what we are doing, we have solved the faster connectivity. But what the point 2 was that we need a way to try out the things faster, right? We need a faster iteration, faster feedback. So till now, whatever orchestration platforms are there in the market, we have to create those workflows manually either via SDK or via UI, via drag and drop. We have actually come up with a product which we call it as an AI assistant, where we can write a prompt that it will convert the Conductor workflow according to the prompt. So this product actually we have dodgefood our own internal workflows. Like we are one of our customer only, like we have automated almost all the things that is required to run an enterprise. So this is the automatic way. So if we write it in a pure English phrase, it will automatically convert it into a workflow. This way it will save a lot of time to try out the things. Now this is near production ready. Why I am saying near? Because this is just a workflow definition. We still need to run it to see whether it is producing a correct result or not, right? So yeah, so what we did, we solved faster connectivity, then we solved that we need a faster iteration. Since that AI assistant product we have built, we have not kept it limited to the workflow creation part. We have also enabled the analytics part for our platform. So let's say we want to find some of the, for example, payments use case, right? So we want to find that how much latency is there, how many workflows are failing, how many workflows are failing in a day, right? Those type of questions, if we have, we can still use the similar platform and it will give you the answer, right? So here you can see that what is the slowest workflow on the last 30 days, right? So it gave the detailed analysis of what were the slowest workflows in the last 30 days. Yeah, so in a nutshell, this is basically a workflow orchestrated platform, but it also powers the Agentic SDK capability, right? So let's say if we want to integrate our existing microservice, we can still do that using a workflow builder, a static workflow builder that we can. So this way also we are one step closer to abstraction, right? Or if we want to build a production ready AI agent, right? So as I mentioned, like we can create integration where we can run model natively, and then we can use those integration to run or power our agent SDKs, right? Now, yeah, so this is one of the most important point. Like, so what happens, like we do experiments, but we still want decisioning to be with us. We don't want AI to make decision for some of the revenue impacting things on its own, right? So what happens, let's say we are asking that for a refund, for example, food processing company, right? So for a refund, let's say, because refund means it's a money thing, right? So we still want human to be in our execution or business loop. So we have provided that functionality also where we can create a human task. So AI can summarize those things, human will review that, these are the things, and then once he approves, I think refund can be processed or refund can be rejected. So this way, there are both the guarantees, like we are leveraging AI things also, and still the decisioning is with a human in the loop. And as I mentioned that it's a modern API platform where we don't need to do everything on its own. We can just describe our API, what it does, and conductor will take rest of the things so that we can move faster. Yeah, so this is some of the detail points about conductor, our platform. So one of our customer is actually running a 1 billion workflow per day. So they are top 3 Fortune 500 company. And this platform is basically designed for high scalable, high throughput systems. Right, so as I mentioned, right, so they are very high throughput systems. And we have open source also. So Conductor was actually originally developed by Netflix, but we have built enterprise layer on top of Netflix. So these are some of the areas where our existing customers are working. So order processing system. So one of the major food delivery app in India, they use Conductor. Insurance and claim processing, fraud detection. So customer support is again one of the major use case. Like one of our customer has built their own ticketing platform, which is powered by Conductor in the backend. Back office processing, and yeah, DevOps and automation. That is also one of the major use case where customer will use our Conductor platform to have deployment on their own, basically, right? So they do deployment using Conductor, all release, CI/CD. They do these things using DevOps and in the DevOps flow, basically, right? So this is something about what exactly are the building blocks that Conductor provides, so that whatever I have told so far makes sense, right? So we have integrations, like we can connect to database, we can connect to events, we can connect to Kafka, RabbitMQ, all the major vector databases, all the major models, right? So using that, we can actually create a component workflow where we can leverage those functionalities, right? So some of the basic building blocks are our system task. The SVP task is basically used when we want to call an API, SVP API. Business rules are basically for the insurance sector people, where they have rules written on the Excel sheet where they want to decide a premium based on the human criteria, age criteria, right? Inline code, this is one of the popular things. Like typically what happens, like we call an API, we want to process some data, we call another API because second API needs a different contract, first API needs a different contract. So we need to write that transformation layer. That layer can be written into inline task, right? Events, LLM, right? So that is the basic system task which Conductor provides. But for example, let's say we don't want to use that because our enterprise production system already has written services, already they are running systems, and we are using multiple different programming language, right? Like C#, Java, Go, Python, SDK. So we have SDKs in all major programming language where we can use and leverage Conductor and talk to Conductor using those SDK. This way, we don't need to change many things while adopting a Conductor ecosystem, right? And sub workflow is basically a workflow inside workflow. So what happens, like let's say we have a very big use case and the workflow size grows. So it's better basically we divide that, and that can be a reusable component. For example, let's say we want to send a notification to customer. Now, if we take an example of food delivery application where we want to send multiple notifications to a customer. So if we create a workflow for sending a notification, then we can use it at any point of time. We just have to invoke those workflows. So basically that is a reusable component. And the last thing is dynamic tasks. So basically what happens, so let's say if we don't know how many tasks we want to invoke, how many things we want to do it in parallel. So this type of use cases we also supports. And as I mentioned, that Conductor was a OSS platform, and Orkes has a built enterprise layer over that. So what exactly is that enterprise layer? So that enterprise layer is basically we have built a SSO, single sign-on, where we support Okta, Auth0, OIDC, automatic sync, like whenever someone joins or leaves the organization, he will have access to Conductor automatically. There are role-based access controls. So for example, let's say HR system has created workflows accounts have workflows, but we don't want account people to see HR workflows. HR people don't want accounts to see their workflows. So we have provide role-based access control, application identity and role. So typically what happens, let's say we want to come up with a use case where they can see the workflow, but they cannot execute the workflow. For example, business analytics people. So we want them to see the workflow, but we don't want them to execute a workflow because they are doing analytics only. So that is also possible using our application identity management. Secrets also we support, like let's say if there are some secrets we want to store in a platform, typically we on a cloud agnostic way, we do store secrets there, but if it is there in Conductor, so there will be a central entity where we have to store. And authentication and webhooks. So webhooks are one of the fastest thing we have, like the webhook latency is sub 1 millisecond for our Conductor ecosystem. Whenever you want to establish a communication between two different systems. For example, let's say someone creates an issue in GitHub, you want to get notified in Conductor and do some kind of post-processing after the notification came. So we can use webhook. So yeah, this slide actually I created based on the feedback I received yesterday. So most of the people are asking that there is N8N, there is Conductor. So what is the primary difference? So primary difference is basically both are suited for different type of use cases. N8N is basically a Node.js single application which powers and provide a rich connectors. So UI type of use cases if you want, then we can use N8N. Conductor is more towards developer where it can sit and closely integrate with your existing application. If you want to run millions of billions of workflow, you can't do that in N8N. You can do that in Conductor. So both are actually a different kind of application, provide different kind of things. And Conductor is basically a distributed system scaled horizontally, vertically, easily. Right, so both are different application actually for different purposes. So yeah, I think now I will call our one of the esteemed customer, StoneX, and Neil will continue further. He is Senior Engineering Manager at StoneX.
Okay, all right. Is it working? Okay, all right. Thank you, Manan, for providing such a wonderful introduction to Orkes, which gives us the foundation for the workflow orchestration. Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Radia. I work as a Senior Engineering Manager in StoneX Group, India. And I will take you through the journey of how we took Orkes from experiment to production. Okay. The question for us at StoneX was not how to build the workflow that we know very well because we are in that industry for many years now. The question for us was how to run the workflows in production at scale, which does not breaks. Just to give you a context of how big the scale of StoneX is, we are a Fortune 42 company. We are kind of a hidden gem in the Fortune 50. The numbers on the screen gives you some of the complexity that we have. So we connect to 40 plus exchanges across the world. We have more than 18,000 OTC products that we trade in. We deal in more than 140 currencies across the 180 countries in the world. Coming to the client base, right? We have 80,000 plus institutional, commercial, and payment clients. Coming to the retail side of it, we have close to 400,000 clients worldwide. Just to give you an idea of the amount, of the scale that we have client assets that we manage close to $14.5 billion. The volume of trade that we do is close to $5.4 trillion. Just to put a context to it, it's more than the current Indian economy. Okay. The next slide tells you about the history that we carry. So across the years, StoneX has acquired multiple companies in last many years. Okay. Last year, we acquired approximately 5 companies where we made our biggest deal in the history of StoneX, where we acquired a company called R.J. O'Brien. What that gives us is more than 100 years, legacy that we carry. We have clients who have trusted us for that many years. So we have a reputation at stake that we deal with. That gives you a kind of idea of how critical our production systems are. Okay, coming to the real challenge which we faced 3 years back. Now, when we scale by acquiring the companies, the system that we carry behind the scenes in production becomes complex. We have many systems coming together and building one powerful workflow that gives clients the real value of its money. So the challenge for us was, as I said, not running the workflows, but running the workflows reliably at scale across geography, and that too under strict regulation norms. We have multi-region workflows which is distributed across the system and that runs across the geographies. We have high cost of failures. So a failed workflow in production is not just a technical retry for us. It can cost us, millions of rupees, and it can pose a very high financial risk to us, right? With AI coming into picture, it does not simplifies the problem, it increases the complexity. As you can understand, with AI coming into picture, now with more automation, the coordination that it needs becomes increasingly complex. If we go across the trade life cycle at StoneX, it spans from execution to compliance to risk to settlement. All of that comes with very strict SLA where we have zero tolerance for failures. Okay. Now, if you combine all of this with auditability, we are a FCA regulated firm which gets audited every quarter and every year as well. So we have regular audits coming up, and we need to provide proofs, traceability of every trade that we do, every step that we have done with that trade, because it's client money that we are dealing with and it's not a joke, right? So we started looking at this problem. The journey started 3 years back when we started to look how we transform our systems into a modern technology stack which can scale at any level, because with the acquisition comes more growth, with that comes more volume. So how do we build the system that can not last for just 2 years, 3 years, but next 10 years, and it can handle the volume that we are expecting? Because our CEO has set a goal to increase our revenue by 5x in 5 years, right? So we looked at our systems, we thought that how do we transform our systems? The paramount to building a good production level system was to build an orchestration layer. So we looked at the market, and then we came across Orkes, which came on top, which gave us the foundation to build the orchestration layer, right? Now, what were the problems before? We had the workflow silos which spread across the system. So logic of how the workflow is driven was spread across different system, and it was not centralized, right? We had very limited visibility. I would say we had zero visibility. Imagine a production support person going into 15 different application logs to find out what's going wrong with that trade, where that trade is, how to move that trade forward. That was the problem we had 3 years back. There were lots of manual intervention. When you have human interactions in between a trade workflow, that means there are high chances of failures, and it increases the compliance risk. Because if any workflow is touched by human, auditor asks multiple questions on that. Why it was touched, what was changed, and why it did not go STP. Going STP is like paramount for us, right? With Orkes coming into picture, combining with the state-of-the-art technology platform that we built, it solved many of these issues. I'm not saying it has solved all of them, but it solved many of the issues, right? Starting with centralizing the workflow orchestration. So we took the workflow orchestration out of individual systems and put it at a centralized place in Orkes. What that gives us, now we can have multiple microservices running into production, which is orchestrated by Orkes centrally. So all the microservice did not need to know about the orchestration and the complexity it produces, right? Orkes manages that. Every workflow is a stateful workflow where every step of the workflow is persisted, whether it is successful or a failed, so that we have visibility at each and every step of a trade life cycle. We built, Orkes that has the built-in resilience, which provides a way to kind of have a better retry mechanism. There is a way to handle the failures with the failure workflows, and that also is centralized. So not every microservice or every application in the chain need to repeat the same things. It is managed centrally. At the end, it gave us the full visibility, where if auditor comes in at the end of the year and asks us, what happened with this trade. So each and every trade is audited. We have the traces of it. We can prove what we have done with that trade, and if there were manual intervention, why there was manual intervention. Okay. Now, since we are in production for last 1 year, what problem is solved for StoneX, right? So I'll cover a bit on that. That gave us a fast track development. Now, if you want to develop faster, we don't need to worry about how the workflow will be managed, and all the teams can go in parallel and run the system faster. It builds the technology agnostic workflows. So if you have multiple teams working on different technology, which they are comfortable with, they're not tied to one technology, because one Orkes workflow, if there are 10 steps, every step can be run behind the scenes with a different technology. So there can be one step, getting solved by Java. There is one step getting solved by .NET. There are agents which can run behind the scenes, which can fulfill those tasks to complete the workflow, right? The workflows that we have built are reusable and configurable. So let's say, for example, if I want to modify a specific workflow for a specific geography or for a specific country or a currency, which we do very often, we can do that now directly by configuring the workflow in production, and we don't need to change the code every time that we do, because I'll give you one of the example. We have our payment system that we do, where every currency has different currency rules, and government also comes up with different regulation which we need to change very frequently. That Orkes is now used across the 3 departments in the company. We have less manual work, less human intervention, thus reducing the risk of compliance failures. The debugging is faster, so production support team now has one-stop shop to go to look at any failures that we have in the trade life cycle. To give you a scale at which we run in the production, we run 1 million workflows daily, which results into 10 million tasks getting executed. I was talking to Manan yesterday, and we are now, I guess, the top 10 customers for Orkes. So that's what the scale we run at. Our system is completely audit ready, as we saw. Now we have the trace of each and everything. Just quickly coming to agentic AI development that is on the boom right now. We are also moving to agentic AI development. We have started using it now. That's where orchestration becomes the key. Because if you don't have a production grade orchestration system, then you can't move faster. You can't move agentic workflows. And that runs reliably in the system. For a company like StoneX, reliability is not a feature. It's the product. And Orkes makes that a reality for us. With that, thank you guys. I'll open up for the question answers now, if you have any questions.
As usual, if you have a question, please put your hand up in the air. We'll have someone come up to you with a microphone. There's a gentleman all the way at the back. Can we have a mic move towards the back, please?
You have mentioned that the flow, whatever you are creating for the orchestration flow, right? Like it will be like good to go for next 10 years. But from last 1 year, we haven't heard about the agentic AI. Now this is the space what we are talking on the agentic AI. And now many things are coming up in the orchestration layers as well, like defining from the sequence flow to the multi flows as well. So how you are thinking in future that it will be helpful for the 10 years or maybe down the line 2 years for flows?
So basically, primary advantage of using any orchestration platform is the iteration and feedback cycles, right? So if we use orchestration platform, then we fail faster, we solve faster, and then we again adapt and we improve faster. That's the whole idea of having orchestration platform to help onboard our agentic world into our enterprise stack.
Yeah, I got it, but how you're maintaining the states accordingly in the orchestration? Because it will be changing rapidly, right? Today, whatever it is working, and tomorrow it might fail, and then you have to change that entire flow as well.
So I'll give an example of that, right? Because we are using that in production, and the key why I moved to this slide is because you can build reusable and configurable workflow. Now imagine a workflow having 10 steps. Now if you have that embedded into the code, right? If you want to change it, let's say if you want to run one particular step in parallel for multiple things, you need to change the code, right? Now with this Orkes, we have taken the workflow out of the code into a centralized place. So it's not your code who is defining which step should run in sequence, That's the typical orchestration pattern. It sits in Orkes. So my code knows what that steps are doing behind the scenes, but it doesn't know which step to run first, which step to run next. So to give you answer, we had a workflow which was running in production, and then we realized that now this step needs to be run by multiple instances because it is taking more time. So I need more power to that, right? Without changing the code, we modified that workflow to run only one step in parallel. So there is a fork and join option in Orkes which you can use. So let's say I have 5 steps. The 6th step I want in parallel, I can fork and create the multiple steps of that same task, which can run in parallel. Now, to answer your question, without changing the code, I change it to support more volume.
Google SDK doesn't support this one, right?
Sorry?
The Google SDK doesn't support this as of now, like in terms of changing these flows. Like we have to rewrite the code accordingly.
Yes. So that's the beauty of Orkes, right? It takes orchestration out of the code.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, that is our time for questions. Can we hear a big round of applause to the gentlemen on stage?
One last
Thank
thing.
you, guys.
Sure.
If you have more questions, we have
Yeah.
booth outside. You can always come to our booth and we can connect offline.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's
Thank you,
wonderful.
guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.